Hello and welcome to another episode of Where Everybody Has Gone Before. We didn't spin the wheel this time, we picked an episode of Star Trek to talk about because a new season of Star Trek finished relatively recently for us. There's a bit of a time delay on us recording and putting these out, but we said we were going to wait until Starfleet Academy season 1 finished before we formed too many strong thoughts about it. And you picked an episode from season 1 of Starfleet Academy for us to talk about, Geoffrey. Which episode did you pick?
Well, I mean, we both brought this up independently to one another, but
Yeah,
I think it's fair to say I finally said let's just do this one, which is episode 5, series Acclimation Mill.
there's a couple of things we could have picked for season 1. It's like, do we go for the one that feels like the best episode? Do we go for the season finale? This is, I think, the one that has the most specific critiques about it.
It's the most to talk about
Yeah.
either way.
So before we get into this is episode 5 of season 1 of Starfleet Academy. Before we get too much into the specifics on this episode,
Season
how
1 of 2,
season 1 of 2? Yeah,
we now know.
we're getting a second, and that's as much as we're getting. Now that season 1 is done, generally, where are you feeling on it now? You've had a little bit of distance from it finishing.
Yeah, I mean, I finished it yesterday
Yes,
because
you
I'm
did.
I'm perpetually catching up, even though it's ostensibly my job to watch this stuff. Um, I'm gonna say a lot of stuff in this episode, I think.
Yeah,
And both about the series and about this episode. So I do actually really want to preface all of this with I genuinely enjoy Starfleet Academy. I think it's
yeah,
a good, fun diversion from the usual Star Trek. I think particularly it has solved a lot of issues within itself that streaming Star Trek has encountered. In particular, streaming Star Trek's inability to adequately develop relationships between its characters,
yes.
which, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, Academy solves by making them all horny teenagers or horny university students, forcing them into school where they have to be together and every single emotion is heightened because they're all basically tall children. And I think that really works about it. I think it is probably the first streaming Star Trek I've looked at and gone, it's fine that this is 10 episodes long. Like, it does. I don't want 20 episodes of this,
Hmm.
but I think it probably could handle 20 episodes, but I don't think it is limited by that limited runtime. So
It's
broadly,
hmm.
I think it's good. It's flawed, as are every single Star Trek series, but
We've
I think
we've
it's
we've said
far
many.
better than
Yeah.
dorks online are saying.
We've many a time during these recordings so far talked about the fact that there isn't really a Star Trek that has a perfect season 1. Like, no matter how much I've enjoyed a Star Trek, season 1's usually a little wobbly, and there are definitely some critiques I could have of season 1 of Starfleet Academy. I finished season 1 a bit earlier than you. I finished it maybe a week or so after the final episode aired, so I've had a few weeks to sit on it. And it's interesting that the last episode we recorded of this before the Starfleet Academy one was Deep Space Nine. Because
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine feels like the closest comparison point for, which is again interesting given the episode we've picked to talk about. Um, Deep Space Nine does feel like it is maybe the closest comparison point in Star Trek for this, because it is, let's pick one setting and slow down and stick in one place that kind of forces you to focus on character interactions. And it's going to fundamentally, as a result, feel very different to any other Star Trek. Whether that is going to be for you or not, mileage is going to vary person to person. But I do really like that it has slowed down and allowed for some exploration of the wider world of the setting, of being able to take this thing that's usually like a very sort of flown past footnote in every major character you've met in Star Trek went here, but it's usually a thing only mentioned in passing, and giving it some flavor and character. I've enjoyed a lot watching it in the context of reading the In Universe Janeway autobiography, which spends several chapters talking about Starfleet Academy and looking at the different takes on the space. Um, it, it's got its problems. It's a little wonky here in places, but it is not this like the death of Star Trek that so many people online have tried to paint it as. It is a fun series with a lot of characters that I am kind of sad we're only going to get one more season with, even if it is far from perfect.
Yeah, I think along with Deep Space Nine, it is the most character-driven series. Most Star Trek is story-driven, right? You have a
Hmm.
story of the week, and that will interact with characters. Here, it's the characters drive everything, and it is. I don't think all the flaws it has are of its own making. I think being saddled with a narrative idea like the burn twice because
Yes.
they try and do it again in the final episode
Yes.
is unfortunate. I think it really, really, kind of it undermines a lot of what this series is trying
It.
to do. But then at the same time, I do think Academy is quite a conservative series. It is very we're trying to rebuild the Federation exactly as it was, except maybe a bit of it's on Beta Z now. We're trying to rebuild the Academy exactly as it was. That can be a bit frustrating, but outside of like a couple of real stinker episodes, I think every episode was really fun and really interesting. And I
Oh.
think it was pretty good. And I don't think that the Captain Holly Hunter puts her feet on the captain's chair really matters, won't we?
No, again, for every person I've seen complain about that, my answer to them would be, and yet you're not here complaining about Riker's continual weird as fuck ways of sitting in chairs.
Well, we had this with Discovery, didn't we? When
Yeah,
Michelle Yeoh and Michael Burnham beat up some Klingons, and loads of dorks online were complaining about it. It's like you never complain when you know Riker and everyone Deep Space Nine were fighting the Klingons and having no problem.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the same thing we always get whenever there's someone who isn't just some white dude in the
yeah.
lead of Star Trek. Everyone gets really upset for some reason. That
Mm.
what I will say is that this series more than anything has really highlighted for me how annoying both sides of Star Trek fandom are. In that you've got all these absolutely insincere losers online complaining about the fact that again, Holly Hunter has her feet on the table or the chair or doesn't wear shoes or whatever. I mean, she's kooky, right? It's a typical kooky character. But you've also got all the people who very clearly watch this stuff and then jump online to say, hey, no, you actually can't have any criticisms about Star Trek. You've got to let me enjoy it. And they're not actually watching the Star Trek. They're just watching it so they can also be online. And then there's people in the middle who I think broadly have just enjoyed it.
I will say,
And
I've seen the former. I don't know that I've seen much of the latter of people going, "You're not allowed to have critiques of it." At
oh,
least
I
where I've
have.
at
I
least
don't know
where I've been on
why.
the internet has been people generally either going, "It's terrible, Star Trek is dying," rah rah rah, or it's been people going, "This is the story I will tell you that has to me really exemplified like the people who've enjoyed this season that I've spoken to." I met up with someone at a party right around when season one of Starfleet Academy was finishing. Hadn't seen him in about 6 months, and we were talking about Star Trek, and he went, "Have you been watching Starfleet Academy?" It turned out he was afraid to ask in case I was going to go on like a "it's terrible" anti-woke rant or something. I don't know why he expected that out of me, but he was almost afraid to say he'd enjoyed it because all he'd faced was people going like, "No, you're not allowed to enjoy it. It's terrible."
That's
Yeah.
interesting because I don't know whether I found out, I guess, from this series that I follow a lot of Star Trek people on Blue Sky,
Hmm.
and all of them were like that. All of them were just this. Everyone just wants to complain about Star Trek. This is really good, actually, and you can't complain about it. You just got to let me enjoy it. And it is very clear that they too were not particularly
I
sincere.
I think
I've
with
got plenty of other
yeah.
people who are just saying, "Yeah, it's good. I
I,
enjoyed it. I think it was great."
I
But
think with any property that reaches this kind of scale over this many decades, you are going to get people who have tied their identity fundamentally into "I enjoy blank," and uh anything that either seems to move it away from exactly what you want it to be, or that is a cultural argument against the thing you enjoy, is going to create some degree of tribalism.
yeah,
But
I mean, this this
yeah.
this also reminds me quite a lot of Star Wars: The Acolyte.
Hmm.
Um, up to and including the fact it was cancelled primarily because a lot of very uncool people online complained about it.
Yeah.
That said, I thought The Acolyte was significantly worse than this, but it had that same kind of
Mm.
feeling around it, that there were people who were, again, being very insincere about complaining about it because sci-fi is a boys' club, apparently, and then lots of people, whether insincere or because they felt driven to defend it more pointedly, kind of on the other side of that aisle, also being quite annoying about it. Broadly, I think cancellation is premature. I think it's probably, um, again, Paramount ignoring the influence of their own platform on the fact that people don't want to watch the stuff they're putting out. That said, I don't think the argument that Star Trek is dying doesn't have any weight, because I think Paramount are like falling to pieces. They're trying to buy Warner Brothers or something. I don't know. Like, there's so much
Yeah.
shit going on. They're trying to buy HBO, aren't they? There's so much shit going on that I can really see
Yeah.
Star Trek suffering because of
We
it.
we are in a real era. If a thing is not instantly the most successful thing in the world, then it's terrible panic pivot, which is not doing anything good for long form storytelling. Well, we should
Which is really, again,
Mm,
so getting this in early because I'd almost missed it
yeah,
last episode, which is really frustrating because Star Trek Picard had like 2 opportunities to reinvent itself in its
yeah,
run, and Academy has not necessarily met expectations, which were probably too high to begin with, and is just cut immediately. So I don't know. I'm a bit.
yeah. We should probably talk about the episode itself. So yes,
Yes.
this is Series Acclimation Mill, which is an acronym SAM, because this episode is focusing on Sam, who is one of our main party members during this season, a photonic being, a hologram person, much like the Doctor from Voyager, from a basically the gist, as I understand it, is humanity created holographic beings, as Sam would put it, used them as basically slave labor, abandoned them. They developed sentience of their own, created their own little planet and their own little culture, and then were like, "Hey, we're gonna send one of you, Sam, out to go interact with the Federation and work out like what are meat beings about? What are the flesh ones? What's their deal? Can we trust them if we were to go reintegrate into society, not to just make us be slaves?" So go join Starfleet Academy despite being like 23 days old, um, and answer all of our questions about flesh beings, which, from all of the little pop ups on screen, basically most of their questions are what is food and why do they food?
Yeah, the pop-ups, which are new to this episode, right? Which
Yes.
is, if just not, I don't want to start too harshly by going criticism straight in, but God, like, firstly, they're not very good, right? They're really inconsistent in the quality that they're presented in. But like, why haven't you just had those throughout the series as like part of Sam? So like Sam, because so I watch
Yeah.
a lot of K dramas, right?
Mm.
And K dramas love to put these things in. You'll have like there'll be a little awkward joke, and there'll be like a sprightly noise, and maybe a little thought bubble,
Yeah.
and they're not always successful because they have to be really consistent across the series and in quality. And I just think it feels really out of place for what this series is. But if you'd had that throughout the series, as a Sam is just someone who is very visual because they are fundamentally a visual representation of a being, I think those would have worked a lot better than just randomly turning up in this episode
Yeah.
because somebody
It,
else wrote it.
I love Sam as a character. Absolutely
I
love
adore
this
Sam.
this awkward, dorky, autistic character who, like, her entire season arc is I am autistic and I'm trying to understand the neurotypicals and they baffle me. Um, but as much as I love her characterization, yeah, this episode like makes some wild choices around how to visually do that representation that I don't think necessarily gel. Like the whole like scribbling on the screen with handwritten writing, um some of those visual elements in this episode, it's not that they're bad, it's that they clash with the rest of the season and they do come a little bit like out of nowhere for this episode.
Oh, I think some of them are bad. There are some of them in there that are very word art,
Yeah.
like
Oh
2005.
yeah.
Like, I mean, I thought So I've obviously watched this episode twice, and it hasn't gone better with the second viewing. But I thought, thinking about it more the second time around, I was kind of like, so maybe this is how she presents her reports to her bosses, so
Yeah.
to speak. But then again, it's have that for the rest of the season, and then it just gets more intense with this episode because it's all about her. But yeah, I agree. I think Sam's great. I think Kerry Brooks is wonderful. Just does a really great job of capturing that. I am both. I think it's either 20 or 200 days old. I can't remember, but she's like
Yeah.
basically I'm a baby, but also an adult, but also
Yeah.
very autistic.
And we obviously address this with a different episode later in the season where there is a chance for her to live more of a life before being at Starfleet. I'm glad that I've basically only existed for a very short period of time, and I have the weight of understanding an entire culture unlike my own resting on my shoulders, is explored in a bit more depth as this season goes on. But yeah, the gist of this episode, there's a couple of things here that like I do think early on are underutilized. One of the first things she talks about is like the list of things that is expected of an emissary, because that's essentially her job, is to be an emissary for this photonic species. And she talks about like you know, diplomatic doing diplomatic meetings with people and solving problems and arguments that arise. And it's like, none of these are things that we've seen you do as an emissary. It, and like watching it a second time, I guess that is kind of the point, is that she has this very divorced idea of, on paper this is what I've read in books an emissary is meant to be, and yet I've been put in a situation where like my job is very different from what like the one description of an emissary I saw once, and that is part of the conflict of this episode, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not sold on this idea of the emissary. I don't, because it flashes up, doesn't it? That it says
Hmm.
emissary equals diplomat. I'm like, I'm not 100% sure that's what an emissary is.
Yeah.
And then when we get to the equivalents, which we haven't spoken about yet, it doesn't quite line up. Like I don't
Hmm.
really. It feels very tacked on that.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just talk about it, I guess, that she is going to explore Benjamin Sisko, the
Yeah.
emissary of Bajor, and the prophets, and it feels very tacked on that she regards herself as an emissary and doesn't really take anything from that,
Yeah.
and doesn't really understand what it is. But the episode doesn't really teach her anything about that other than to just be, I'm just going to be myself,
I
I
it's
guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there are characters from that era of Star Trek that would have probably, if we took away the word emissary and the pressure that like that had to be the role model she learned from, I think there are better examples, maybe even in Deep Space Nine, of
Oh no,
characters
there
that are,
is.
yeah, that are going through things more akin to what she's going through that she could have learned interesting things from. Odo comes to mind immediately.
Oh no. There's a
Yeah.
very
Okay.
very easy one. And
Who's
this
who
is going to
comes to
be
mind
one
for
of
you?
no. Well, this is going to be like one of my main criticisms of this
Yeah.
episode, right? So she is regarding herself as this link between two cultures, an emissary, a diplomat, who, in even her history, is a very famous diplomat, Curzon Dax, and who
I
has
mean,
gone through
yeah.
a certain amount of insecurity about learning from that,
I
Jadzia
mean,
Dax.
yeah, Dax was going to be one of the ones I brought forward. I was going to go. It's like, look, I think Odo, Dax, and the holographic Doctor are three really good examples of people that you could have centered the "Who am I? Let's learn through historic Star Trek characters" thing around. And
Oh yeah,
like,
and Odo's a really
yeah,
good one as well, by the way.
yeah,
Though obviously Rene Auberjonois is
yeah.
dead,
No,
so they can't bring him
yes.
back.
Well,
Um,
they didn't have to have any new on camera film of Cisco to have the episode center around
that's true.
Cisco.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think there are characters that would have made for stronger choices, and the Cisco stuff is a little. It's a stretch. And I will say, I think that the writer and actor do, in combination, do a really good job of, if that's the storyline we're going to follow, having some really well done, emotionally acted moments come out of holding to that comparison. I don't think it's a great comparison to have chosen, but I do think they write some really good scenes to make the most that they can of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the premise of the episode is strong.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a Sam episode, and we get
Yeah.
another one later that's better, which doesn't help this episode. And I don't think this idea of really drilling down into Sam's mission
Hmm.
and how she's experiencing that in a moment of, let's say, crisis with her
Hmm.
bosses, overseers. I don't know. The word doesn't come to me. I think
Yeah.
that's fine. And again, I think it's explored later better. I I don't actually think the writing is strong in this one. I think there's
I
moments, but I
I
think a lot of the moments are not dialogue and character driven. I feel like they're more likely to be a bit improvised, such as the club scene, which I think is
The
delightful.
club scene is delightful, and to be clear, I don't think it's consistently well written. When I say that there are some moments that I think take good advantage of the premise, I'm thinking of things like the performance that's given at the end with the once the book's been opened toward the end, there is this sort of crying breakdown of does being an emissary mean that I will always be beholden to a life laid out for me before I had a chance to have any input in it? And like, there are some moments like that that do take good advantage of the premise, even if it's kind of a bad premise that's
Mm.
generally not well taken
I think it's
advantage
worth
of.
pointing out as well that this was written by Tawny Newsom
Yeah.
from Lower Decks, but also I wrote it down. Fuck. Kirsten Beyer. So
Mm.
this is written by two people. So there's going to be, I would say, looking at this, it does feel like it was written by two different people,
Yeah.
and that wasn't always two people writing together.
Yeah. Because
It was, yeah,
Yeah, because this is definitely it's an episode of two halves in terms of its tone. Because the stuff that works best, I think, as you sort of alluded to, is the um screw the fact that I have a destiny. I'm gonna just cut loose and try and immerse myself in humanity, despite the fact that like there's a time pressure on me. Things like the scene at the nightclub, but also things, any of the bonding with people scenes. Like, as goofy as it is, right near the start, there's that whole little interlude of the weird, slightly awkward, goofy nicknames that a bunch of people at the academy have for Sam, and that what there's the one that's never explained of Queen Sam of Samalina with the sort of like bowing down. I have no idea who that character is. I want to know more about them. As cheesy as it is, that was a moment I really enjoyed because it really leaned into the part of the experience of understanding humanity is sometimes you're not going to be able to explain how you got to a point with with someone. It's in the living of the experience that that moment makes sense. And like some of that
yeah, like
human centered writing's great.
yeah. I think it's like the cheesy fun stuff that we've already seen in the series works really well, and then when it tries to be very profound and almost portentous, particularly about Sam,
Mm,
it just feels a little shallower. And but again, I do think Kerry Brooks is just so good,
yeah.
both in this and broadly, that she does elevate
She,
quite a lot of what we're
yeah.
seeing.
She carries a lot of weaker moments in this episode. Punches above her weight.
Yeah, which
Um,
which is important because like there aren't the adults just aren't there because
yeah.
there is a B story here of um the
It's
war
the
college guy
it's
that
the
has a
least I've ever
girlfriend
cared
or
about.
something,
In all the
and
episodes
they
we've
have
talked
dinner.
about, it's the
Like,
least I've cared about a B story in any of the episodes we've
oh yeah,
discussed.
it's like I appreciate that Captain Akay
Yeah.
and that guy whose name I never remember because
War
I think the
College
war
Man is
college
what he is
doesn't.
in my notes.
Yeah, who is also a little
Yeah.
bit autistic. Um, I like that they're developing a bit of a bond, but
They,
broadly, that whole big story is
yeah.
completely
They
useless and
they
doesn't.
needed they needed to be less at each other's throats so that the kids would be less at each other's throats, and I'm glad that development happened. But this episode in particular, I really think could have done with if you'd cut the entire B story and given more room. Because one of the biggest problems this episode has is that it doesn't have enough time for either the exploration of what Sam's going through or the comparison to Cisco. Both of them feel Like, there's not enough space for either of those to get properly explored, and a bit more time for either one of them might have really helped this episode.
Yeah, but at the same time, this episode's like an hour and 5 minutes long. You could have cut out the B story and had a solid 40
Yeah,
minutes.
I did
Um,
notice it was a longer one than I thought it was going to be.
oh, they're so long.
Mm.
They're all over an hour. It's
It's the
ridiculous.
world of streaming episodes. There's no longer any pressure to be concise with your episodes when they can be any length you want because TV doesn't
Paramount
care.
Plus has adverts, and
Yeah.
they don't write the shows for the adverts. It's just I don't know. I don't. We've had this discussion before. I don't
Yeah.
believe any TV should be longer than 45 minutes. But
But
yeah,
yeah,
these episodes are really long.
like going back to that stuff of like the human center stuff. One of my favorite jokes in this episode is really early on, and it's the idea that these are basically teenagers. These kids daring each other to do things they don't want to do are being colloquially called priority one missions. That really amused
That is
me.
a good one.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the kind of shit that I think Starfleet Academy needed more of. Is the just like building up the culture of this like youth military organization to give it flavor.
But that's the sort of shit you do in university.
Yeah,
You come up with silly names for things. Like when I was in university, we all very annoyingly called it school, and then all the
yeah.
tutors got really upset with us because like, oh, we'll see you in school. We're going to school, like, you know, and which that's what you do. I really like that stuff in academy. I really like how relatable it is to actual university experiences. And then when it tries to go beyond that and makes all the cadets like proper Starfleet people randomly, it doesn't quite work for me.
It's
Um,
it's
but
it's
yeah,
why it's
that joke was
why
good.
yeah. It's why the only episode this season that I think really works great in terms of like them being proper Starfleet people is the one with that mission that goes really, really wrong. It
Yeah,
because
that's the next episode.
it,
Yeah,
it leans into this whole thing of these people think they're adults and then the real world happens at them and they're like, oh, they're all suddenly looking for the adults in the room and going, ah, fuck, that's us. Um, like, if you're gonna do a thing aimed on university age, like, that's the place you've got to remind everyone they're at, is they think they're adults until there's no adults in the room and then they panic a bit.
yeah. I mean, you say that, but I also think the episode that comes after that, where they're all being forced to confront their trauma, is probably the worst of the series for me. I really didn't like that episode where it's just you've got Tilly from Discovery just shouting at people, going, "No, you're traumatized. Be traumatized. You've got to be traumatized right here, right now, and tell me all about it. But you've got to tell me all about it in the right way, or I fail you." And also, here's a play.
Here's a play, and everything's gonna have to be very relevant to the play. You have to
Yeah.
explore your feelings through the lens of the play.
Anyway, hang on. So I've led us on a tangent. So she has a tutor. So Sam has a tutor.
Yeah.
She wants to go. She has to take a class. She's been ordered to take a class,
Yes.
which is led by Professor Eela, who is like Bono at this point. She only has one name, and on the screen is something like the mystery of Benjamin Sisko, and it fascinates Sam.
Did he live forever with the prophets, or did he die in the caves? 800 years later, this is a question we're asking.
Well, it shouldn't be. We know exactly what happened,
Yeah.
that he is no longer corporeal.
Yeah.
All of the hints that came from DS9 were that he does eventually come back.
Yeah.
There's even a book, which I don't think is canon anymore, where he comes back. But we're going to ignore all that because we need to have a mystery around this for some reason, because that's the only way we can talk about Ben Sisko.
The premise of this episode is baffling because the only lens I could see it through, as someone that grew up Christian, is that this really feels like the plot of the episode is, you put a poster up on a wall going, Jesus, did he die in the cave over those 3 days, or is he alive in heaven with God? We got to find the empirical, proven answer. And this is an episode about Sam going to churches and being like, yeah, but can you prove to me that Jesus is in heaven, though? Can you give me solid evidence? It's Sam walking around trying to go, can you prove your religion's real? Do you have empirical evidence of your religion? Prove your religion to me.
But they also have that bit where Caleb's all cynical about religion as well, isn't he? He's like, "Oh, this is just so people can like shore up their beliefs, and it's so silly. That dude's dead," and it's it. the in DS9 there is a
Yeah.
very clear allegory between Cisco, Jesus, Moses kind of thing. It's a
Yeah.
very religious thing, and that's fine. It works, right? But like so much in this episode, for some reason, Newsom and Bayer just feel the need to just lay it all out in real, like,
Yeah.
you have to tell us that this is happening. And it's all information that is either for people like us who have seen these shows
Hmm.
is kind of annoying, and for people who haven't seen it is completely
It.
useless. It's not going to
Yeah.
encourage anyone to go watch
There's.
DS9 because it's ruining the
Well,
ending more than
this.
anything, but it's also
Yeah.
useless.
This is what I mean about it not having enough time to do the thing, or at the very least, not doing enough with what it needs to do. It either needed to be a better episode at selling people on what made Cisco interesting, or it needed to give Deep Space Nine fans something new about their understanding of Cisco by the end of it. And it doesn't really achieve either. It sort of straddles both approaches and doesn't succeed on either.
Well, it just does it in the end. It doesn't really feel like it's trying to be sincere about DS9. It feels more like it's trying to lead up to a needle drop of, hey, look me up by my full name, Ela Dax.
Yeah,
It's
that was such a needlessly we're doing it. I'm hesitant to say that things in Starfleet Academy are there for fan service. This one is there to go, we brought back fan character, and
oh, this
then
this
do nothing
episode
with
is
it.
all referenced. They've got a
Yeah.
fucking typewriter from In the Pale Moonlight. That's not even real in Star Trek. I'm assuming it's a representation, but I don't think Cisco's going to report to his bosses, oh, here's my log of me having a 40-minute dream about being a black writer in the 1920s. I just
Yeah.
there's so much reference in this. And
Also, if the Bajoran orb in that museum is real, like, there's stuff in that museum where I'm like, I doubt you would leave that just unattended. That's like a religious holy artifact that you've just left
you've
for
got
people to fuck around
Bajoran
with.
students, right?
Yeah.
You'd think, oh, we're going to give you the orb. So, okay, I'm going to talk a bit about my issue with the narrative here.
Yeah.
So, we're going to do an episode about Ben Sisko. It's going to be a tribute to Avery Brooks, and it's going to happen entirely within Starfleet Academy for some reason. At the beginning of the series, we are shown very pointedly Bajor.
Yeah.
Right? Captain Akay is living on Bajor.
Yeah.
She's running an orphanage on Bajor, and you're sitting there going like, "Why are they showing us Bajor? What is special about Bajor?" And then you get to this episode, and I had this
Yeah.
spoiled for me a bit in that I knew that Avery Brooks is back,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, so they're going to go to Bajor, right? It would make sense if either they're having a field trip to Bajor, or it's you guys are acting like fucking children, so we're going to go meet some children in this orphanage I used to run. And then you can go to the fire caves and go, here's the fire caves. You have Bajorans explaining who Benjamin Sisko was, because he's probably the biggest character in their history.
Mm.
And then there's any number of ways that you can then connect with Sisko in a more diegetic way, where maybe Sam is hearing his voice and she's going through this crisis, but then even when you're ignoring that, you've got an orb allegedly in New Orleans in this museum, and she's talking into it, and at no point does it interact with her.
Yeah.
You could have had all these visions that we get in Deep Space Nine that she has, whether they're real or not, but instead this is all happening in the Academy. Most of this episode is Sam telling us about Benjamin Sisko. We're not seeing anything. We're not being shown anything. We're just being shown lots of points of reference, that all of which could be used really effectively to tell the story, but are completely ignored, including but not limited to the planet of Bajor and the Bajorans who clearly still exist.
All you
It's my
get in
little
terms... No, it's fair. In terms of interactions with Bajorans, all you really get is Sam storms into Bajoran meditation club, tells them to turn the music down. I demand you provide physical, tactile evidence of your religion to me. I'm going to talk over you, listen to none of it, and walk out. Which, part of me wondered on this second viewing, is that deliberate to a degree? Whether, if it was deliberate, that wouldn't make it good. But is it deliberate? Is it trying to pull an allusion to Sam is ultimately not that different from the people who sent her out here as an emissary, in that she is demanding very solid, immediate, tactile, measurable evidence of a thing that ultimately has to be felt rather than measured. Like that is the thing that she's really stressed because she's being put through, but she is ultimately like doing the same to another group's culture and not going, what do I know about humanoid life? Sometimes you got to slow down and just feel the thing.
Yeah, well, she is under time pressure, isn't she? Just
Yes,
like
she's
a
got a
week.
week. Yeah.
So it might just be I'm here for the facts and only the facts, and she can't really understand anything that isn't that. But I think at least two of her friends have pretty significant belief-based
Yeah.
systems. Doesn't the fish guy have a lot of ritualistic stuff that
Yeah.
comes from his future possible marriage, and then the Klingon guy
Yeah.
also has quite a lot. He embraces his Klingon culture even if he's not fully in that kind of I'm gonna drink blood and stuff kind of
Hmm.
vibe. So I don't know. It again, like, huge problem I have with this is so much of it feels very shallow. Not just
Yeah.
about DS9 and Cisco, but also for what we've already seen in the series. That it doesn't seem to carry on a lot of what we have learned. Sam hasn't learned any of that somehow, and I don't
Yeah.
really understand how that works.
Hmm.
Um,
Uh, Pulling back to some other specific notes I made earlier on in the episode, I do like the metaphor they kind of explore with Sam enjoying the theremin, even if like it's a little transparently laid out by the end of the episode of like we're going to tell you it's a thing that doesn't have a physical form but it still can make music and that's I like the metaphor enough but when Sam's trying to justify to her creators like why she wants to learn music, they suggest music will not allow us to confirm we are safe to interact with organics. That annoyed me because I was like, no, music is maybe the best way to understand if you're going to be safe in a culture. The difference between a culture that has like anti-capitalist punk versus like skinhead music with anti-immigrant like metal like is going to tell you entirely different things about like the youth culture and beliefs of a region. Music can tell you so much about a culture. Ah, that
I
annoyed me
do.
more than it should have.
Yeah, I'm right there with you because I do think Star Trek has a real issue when it comes to music. It
Hmm.
doesn't like in universe music. It doesn't really have a way to express itself musically. It's always like, here's some classical music. It's
Yeah.
the Beastie Boys, or it's we're in a club and we've got some very weird like EDM driving
Yes.
beats. There's nothing really interesting happening with the music, and so I don't think any of the writers have ever really understood music in a way that lets them do something interesting with it in sci-fi. And all we learn about music in Academy is
Hmm.
someone on the staff really likes Rufus Wainwright, which fair dues. But again, that's not. We're not. I would really love to see a Star Trek series that embraces the idea of well, at this point, we're like 1,000 years into the future. Music may evolve beyond club music
Hmm.
and Beastie Boys. Um,
A- a
but
fif-
yeah,
hmm.
so like just to get back to
Yeah,
some of the
yeah.
plot, right? So,
Yes.
'cause I have a question for you.
Okay.
Of we, so she's done lots of reading about Cisco.
Yeah.
We've had nothing really substantive about him. We've not really seen anything meaningful, and then she's discussing a book with her teacher, and it's a
Hmm.
book that this teacher just so happens to own. It's an unpublished novel by
Yeah.
Jake Sisko. Now, at that point, are you thinking anything other than, oh, that's Dax? That's got to be Dax.
I didn't. The first time watching this, I didn't twig in advance that she had the book. And when the book comes up, like right at the end, is explicitly stated, I I assumed it had to be Dax purely because
There's no one else who could have it,
if you're
right?
gonna do well, it was mostly who are you gonna who else would you do that twist reveal with? There's no one else that you go and it's me.
But
That be
it's also because she very pointedly says that he asked her to look after it when she gives
Oh
gives the
yeah,
book to
yeah,
Sam.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, so you're not even like a collector who's managed to track
yeah,
this down. You're very clearly someone who was there at the time.
yeah.
And there's only
Yes,
like one character
yeah.
who's that
At that
immortal.
point, yes, it could only be. I will say my biggest complaint about that reveal is weirdly nothing to do with. It's all to do with the visual of it. They do the shot where she pulls her hair back to reveal the trill markings, but the shot is done in such a way that the trill markings are out of focus. The front of her face is in focus, but it's such a narrow focus on the shot that the trill markings are blurred. They are out of focus. You don't get to clearly see them in the reveal shot. And just cinematography wise, that annoyed me so much.
But it's fine because this whole episode is built on characters telling you something is happening. So Sam sits there and goes, "Oh, are those trill markings? Ela isn't a second name. You're not Bono."
Ah.
But okay, so I've had a couple of runs. So she gets the book, and when she opens the book, for some reason, she has a vision of Jake Sisko, and Cyril
Yeah.
Lofton's there, and he's still got it. He's still fucking Jake. I mean,
Yeah.
they weren't able to get Avery Brooks for this. Avery Brooks has moved on. He doesn't give a shit
Yeah.
anymore. He's gone to do whatever you want. He's given his blessing. Cyril Lofton's there. I think the script that they gave Cyril Lofton sucked, but I think he was great. I was immediately transported back to him being Jake, and also I think his interaction with Carice Brooks was terrific.
For any problems I have with the script he was given, I do think it was genuinely really nice to see grown up adult Jake not be this whiny, annoying little shit that he was in Deep Space Nine, and to see him as like, oh, that's an adult that I can believe genuinely did succeed as a writer in a way that, like, it went from being this thing that a child says but isn't really making the effort to work towards to, like, oh, you got your shit together and you made something of yourself. I really like that this is going to be the image of adult Jake Sisko I now get to have. This is great. I'm glad that that exists, even if it's not always well written. I think that the sincerity with how the two of them were acting together in that last scene was really sweet.
Yeah, and I'm really conflicted about this episode because I think outside of Tawny Newsom, who I because of this episode I kind of have beef with now, I think this is probably one of, if not the best acted episode of Academy.
Yeah.
But I also think it's the worst written, and I think that's really highlighted in the Cyril Lofton Reese Brooks bit because I think they're both doing such good work, and yet the script isn't quite letting them. But they're kind of they're kind of transcending that by being good actors.
There's some really
I do think
yeah.
it's. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, again with this, I think there are a lot of beats that are correct that just aren't executed well. I do think, especially once you can't get Avery Brooks to come in and do some voiceover or actually be in it, completely justifiable. I'm completely happy with that. Avery Brooks just doesn't give a shit about Star Trek
Yeah.
anymore. He's 77, he's retired, whatever. I do think it's really good that you have Jake talking about his father and talking about coming to terms with his father not being there, but kind of under the impression that he's there somewhere. I think that's really important. When we go back to Deep Space Nine, it was really important to Avery Brooks that Sisko leaving wasn't viewed as within the same kind of stereotype of a black father abandoning his family.
Yes.
And that's kind of the vibe that series finishes with.
And
I think it's kind of shitty that this episode of Academy reinforces that idea rather than giving the ambiguity that he can come back. But I think Jake talking about it is really good.
I like that Jake explores that question, and the way that it's presented is very much. Initially, I asked why him. Why did it have to be my father? Why did he have to be my dad have to be the one to be gone? And then with time, I realized he wouldn't have been the father to me that he was if he wasn't also the person who was destined to do this. the things that made him a great father were also the reasons that he had to do this, and that he had to be something for people, for more than just me. And like that's a really sweet bit of closure to that I think is really nice to get explored from Jake's perspective. I'm glad we do get that reinforced. It There is some stuff here I do really like about how it's handled. I don't entirely hate the bringing up, like the redelving into the Cisco's. There's a lot of it that doesn't work, but there are some really beautiful bits that come out of it.
Well, I think an important thing to point out is that at the end of Deep Space Nine, when Cisco's leaving, and he says, "I'll come back," you know,
Yeah.
he's saying that to Cassidy Yates, who's his new wife, who is pregnant. He doesn't really get a moment with Jake before he leaves,
Mm.
and so this feels like this is redressing that a little bit. But I think for me, broadly, like one of the major issues here is I don't think this is a mystery. First, I don't think there was any suggestion that he doesn't come back in a corporeal way, or
Yeah.
he doesn't interact with the world again. Bearing in mind that at the end of Deep Space Nine, the wormhole's still there, and one assumes during Academy, the wormhole's still there. They could just go to the wormhole and see what's what, because if
Yeah.
he's in the Celestial Temple, he's going to be in there, right? And
Yeah.
they have had interactions with the. I do like that. I don't think this is a mystery, and if you're going to treat it like a mystery, I don't think it needs this resolution. And the resolution is that no, he's gone. He fucked off. He did, in fact, kind of abandon his family. He had to. He didn't have a choice. That was the character he was. I think this episode gets that exactly right. But I think in cementing that, it's kind of doing a disservice to what was actually a very heartfelt and quite urgent ending to Deep Space Nine.
I agree, and I think that anytime you are paddling your feet in the area of, like, you're messing around in the area of, did a religious figure, like, how permanent was the departure of a religiously significant figure? I feel like probably the answer narratively is not to give a definitive answer there. I think that anytime you're giving a definitive answer to that, it's either going to have it's either going to be a real letdown for characters within the setting, or it's going to completely shift the beliefs of a culture, and that's, I think, consequences bigger than this episode needed. Because, like, again, pulling back, there are bits of this episode I love. That scene in the nightclub, there's so much in there that is like completely unrelated to the Cisco stuff that I think is wonderful. I love the fact that when Sam realizes I've got a week to get into this course or not, and she's invited out drinking, she doesn't use "oh, I've only got a week" as an excuse to be like, I'm going to ignore the socializing, I'm going to keep learning. She uses it as an excuse to blow off some steam, go forget about the problem, and immerse herself in human culture for it, like in humanoid culture for a bit. Very human. Um, Jumping from never drinking to simulated 12 shots as a way to go, I'm just going to turn the autism off for a bit, um, and just spill some feelings out. Wonderful. I really love the performance of going straight to, I'm so drunk I'm going to compliment everyone around me the first time I get really drunk. I love all of you, you're all great. No, what I'm feeling right now is real. It's not the alcohol, it's real. All superbly handled.
Punching the Romulan lady,
Yeah.
just out of the blue,
My favorite
completely out of character for Sam in a
Yeah.
good way.
My
Loved it.
my favorite bit in that whole bar scene is weirdly nothing to do with Sam. It's the Klingon and the member of the War College who, they've got a thing going on. I really like the bit where both halves, like the Starfleet and the War College, both are trying to pull them apart. Not because like we're homophobic, but they're both like, no, 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 you can do well, you can do much better than that sort of low light. You don't need one of them. You're much better. You deserve so
I,
much
I,
better.
So I really like that relationship throughout the series.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether it was at the club or whether it was at the academy. I really like the bit where they're all like at each other's throats, and that guy rocks
Oh.
up as like, "Guys, great jackets."
Yes, yes. But
Like
again,
there are so many there's so many things to like about Academy, but also so many
yeah,
things to like in this episode, especially when it's removed from, kind of this writerly bullshit of we have this twist, and so we're going to manufacture a tribute to Avery Brooks around it, which
yeah.
I think is really, really unfortunate. There's so much to like about this episode, and there's so much that they get right in terms of this is, these beats that work or would
Yeah.
work if they were executed well and
It,
sincerely. And I think that's the thing.
the
Deep Space
Cisco,
Nine
yeah,
is for any of its faults and for any of its perks, boons, whatever, is a surprisingly deep series,
yeah.
right? And that's led by Avery Brooks. Brooks is he's kind of an eccentric dude. He's a very intelligent and deep person, and that really led what Deep Space Nine became. And you listen to people talk about it on the set. It's like this was, people from the next generation would come over from goofing off, and they would see the Deep Space Nine set and Avery Brooks on it and go like, "Well, this is like really serious. Like everyone's like at work here." And I think when you take something that deep and that demands that much attention, and you drive it into something slightly shallower, I don't think you really have much room for error. I think
Yeah.
Kerry Brooks carries this episode to something much better than it should be given the writing that we're seeing
It,
and the lack of general interest in what DS9 is doing beyond how it can serve, frankly, and I don't want to put this all at her door, beyond how it can serve Tawny Newsome in becoming a bigger part of Star Trek canon. Right? I don't think that it really works that you've got the writer dropping themselves in as one of the most prominent Star Trek characters, and
oh,
as
oh, is the person play? Sorry, I've only just twitched. Is the person playing that character the writer?
yeah, it's Tawny Newsome, who's one
Oh,
of the main characters in Lower Decks, right? And she was in
yes.
Strange New Worlds.
Sorry, I hadn't recognized through the makeup that was being done. Sorry,
The
I've only
very thick
yeah.
prosthesis that she's
Sorry,
wearing, her Cardassian.
I've only
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
put two and
Oh,
two.
sorry.
No, I sorry.
Yeah, that's Tawny Newsome. Yeah, and she wrote the
Yeah,
episode.
no, I knew that
Um,
Tawny Newsome wrote the episode. I hadn't put two and two together. That's who was under the prosthetic.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
feel
That's
foolish
that's why
now.
that's why I
Yeah,
say when I say
I see
this
what you
is
mean about
probably
the
the best
yeah.
acted.
You've written
I
yourself into
think that
being a
Tawny
more
Newsome
prominent.
is not
Yeah,
included in that summation because I don't think that character is very good, and I don't think she's very good as that character. That might be the limitations
I
of the
wouldn't
character
know.
because I
That
really liked
character's
her in
done
Strange New Worlds.
that character's done basically nothing so far, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
know. Um,
she's just there for a twist.
yeah, because
But yeah, I just
this
go on. Sorry,
episode,
yeah.
yeah, as you say, it feels so split into two halves. Because nothing in the Cisco half lives up to like the little stupid exchanges we get in that bar. There's one I keep thinking back to. Oh my god, I've got to dance to this. It's my favorite song. I guarantee you've never heard that song before.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that is on such a much better writing level than any of the awkward attempts to connect this episode to the bigger Starfleet universe, the Star Trek universe. This could have been an episode completely devoid from the rest of Star Trek's chronology, and I think it would have been better for it.
Yeah, and my problem with those bits is that they feel like they could be improvised, right? They
Yeah.
feel, but and that could be really good writing. I think if something feels like it could be improvised and isn't, that's great writing. But the evidence of the rest of the episode for me doesn't suggest that there's good writing involved here.
I don't want to dismiss the chance that I don't want to assume improvisation. I want to give the credit of I get the impression from this season generally that there are some people very good at writing young adult casual dialogue. Like there is some good casual teenage dialogue writing on this writing team, and that I think a lot of what we are seeing in this episode is from people who work their asses off to write some well written dialogue. The fact that it does not land for the attempts at the more serious or interconnected world scenes, I don't think should take away from the fact that I think there probably were some very good writers on parts of this episode.
Well, there's two writers on this
Yeah,
episode that are credited.
yeah,
I admit I haven't actually looked into it enough to know where Kirsten Bayer wrote elsewhere, but I assume she's part of the writing team.
yeah,
Bonnie Newsom, this is her first writing credit outside of
yeah.
like a short film or something. So
It's the classic.
that writing isn't there.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised to learn that a lot of the more established stuff that works throughout the series
yeah.
came from people like Kirsten Bayer.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not suggesting that she came in and wrote for the first time and that we accredit all of the good character writing to her. I'm just not ready to jump to, oh, it was probably improvised if it was
oh
good.
no, and similarly, like she was in Lower Decks, and I'm sure there was some like I if you told me that actually, oh, this club scene, well, Tawny Newsom wrote quite a lot of that. I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. I just think there's a lot here that feels very cynical,
Yeah, I don't
and
disagree.
cynical around Newsom and her inclusion
I
in the
don't
series
I
as
don't
an actor and
disagree.
writer.
Yeah,
And I would point out, I would couch all of this in because I've there are things I like. I've tried to be as pointed about that as possible, but
yeah,
I will add that Deep Space Nine was like the series I grew up on. I know
yeah,
you're a little bit more removed from Deep Space Nine based
yeah,
on last week, but Avery Brooks is a very important actor in
yeah.
my life because of that.
I
And there's
I
only like
I fully
there's a handful
recognize.
of actors
Yeah,
who would have that kind of status for me, where their performance has been quite
yeah.
powerful and influential. So
I
there is
fully
an element
recognize
of
that
I will
missteps
be
on
a
this
bit
are gonna hit
harsher.
you harder. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I can also understand why some people who have been particularly harsh on this episode elsewhere, that might be where it comes from.
yeah,
And it's kind of lost in a lot of the vitriol that this series has uh, attracted. But yeah, so I would add that little caveat of like, this shit's really important to me on a media
yeah,
level. And that's why it's so disappointing that I think Deep Space Nine, it hasn't been picked apart in this way other Star Treks have by New
yeah,
Trek. And I do think it deserves a few more flowers, and I do think Avery Brooks deserves a tribute. And I'm
yeah.
just really disappointed that this is what we
I
got. And we should
yeah.
mention that Avery Brooks's voice is in the series, is in the episode at the end
Yes.
as a disembodied
Yeah.
monologue.
To my understanding, this is a clip taken from elsewhere. There's some debates as to where the clip comes from. It might
Oh
be
no,
from a.
sorry, no, I did more research on this. So
Okay,
this is
okay.
from his self-published jazz album Here from I think it was
Yeah,
2009, which has a bunch of songs, but also has a lot of spoken word
yeah,
tracks. And so this is one of, I think this is like track 11 or 12. This is Cyril Lofton chose this when Avery Brooks is basically like, I'm not going to be in this.
yeah.
I'm not going to record anything, but you're welcome to pick it from here. And Cyril Lofton, I assume, just picked the one that sounded
Yes.
more spacey.
So this is where I
Um,
was going to get to is the
yeah.
two things I've seen people saying is, oh, it's from a jazz album. No, there's no music behind it. It's from a recording of poetry he did. No, both are kind of true. It's from a spoken word bit in a jazz album.
A
But
self-published album that you
yes,
can't get anymore, and if you can only listen to some of the songs on YouTube, so you can't actually get the
yeah,
spoken word stuff. But it's also completely disembodied.
yeah,
So the episode ends with Sam's kind of accepted her role. She's accepted that the pressures that she's feeling maybe aren't as important as she thinks, and that she just wants to live. And she's speaking to the orb one last time, and you think, okay, if Avery Brooks is going to be in this in some way, it's going to come from the orb, right? And no, she looks out the window, and she's speaking again to Brooks to say, "Hey, I'm off. I'm going to go do my thing." And then we just have this completely random monologue, and then the screen goes black, and it says, "Thanks, Avery."
yeah.
Have I summed that up accurately? I don't know. I feel
I
like
mean, yeah, that's basically what happens. I will say, I don't know if you felt the same way. I chose to interpret that bit of hearing Avery Brooks at the end as, oh, okay, so Cisco is still out there in some non corporeal form, I'm not saying he's directly in that moment 800 years later reading this, but as a there's more of Cisco out there having thoughts than what could be on paper learned by Sam or whatever.
I don't know. It just felt very tacked on to me.
Oh
I
yeah,
thought. I
no, it
thought.
did.
So
It
the one
felt
thing I'll
100%. We
say.
need to have his voice in this episode somewhere, and
Yeah,
this
exactly.
we had no better place to put it, so we put it here.
We've decided we want to do this episode, and it turns out Avery Brooks doesn't want to come back, so we've got to do something. The
Yeah,
one thing I will say is like I do wonder about the Cyril Lofton stuff because he's acting like he's there and he's a living
yeah,
creature. I do wonder whether that I don't know whether that's like the book is programmed in some way or whether it's he is also obviously part prophet and maybe he's filling in for what could have been Avery Brooks's role of he does appear to Sam because I think that would have been far more
I
impactful if in
I
some way even
really
if through
yeah.
archive audio
I
he
really do feel
interacts with
like that is
Sam.
what the plan was. I
Yeah.
everything in me says this was meant to be a sit down between Sam and Cisco that is unexplained, and maybe Sam imagined it, but it's happened, and it brought some closure.
But again, that goes back to like the narrative issues I had
Yeah,
with it, right? You could have had that in the fire caves. You could have had
yeah,
that through the orb. If it was on Bajor and they were near the wormhole, that all of that would have made sense. But it just feels very desultory, very disorganized around it. And again, I appreciate that's probably because Avery Brooks wasn't there, but they could have made that work even with that archive audio, and they didn't. And I think broadly, if I'm going to give a final thought on this, I don't think the writing was great in this episode, but more than that, I've spoken to you about this before, probably with Picard. Here we go. There's two drive-bys in one episode. Um, I really hate the wasted potential in some of these series,
mm,
and I really, these are writers in incredibly privileged positions where they are essentially getting first dibs at relitigating these old stories,
mm,
and in such a way that probably we can't explore this again. We can't revisit the next generation
mm.
again without it feeling tacked on. We can't try and do another, tribute to Avery Brooks. And this is what we get from it. And
Uh,
they've got so much at their fingertips, and
yeah,
they've wasted it on this kind of
yeah,
really disorganized and ultimately a tiny bit unpleasant episode that is
yeah,
just all over the place. And I'd be interested in what you
yeah.
think broadly about that.
Broadly, this is why at some point I want to go look through the list of all the Lower Decks episodes and find an episode to bring you. Because I do think that, to your point you're making, Lower Decks is maybe the one place that I think, because of its being animated and being off in the corner and being um, a little more silly in its presentation, it does have some room that it can go, hey, we can relitigate and some old Star Trek. We can go re-explore and do some love letter episodes where we can use a sound alike for a person because we're doing it in animation. We can do some little tricks to justify why they're not on screen. Oh, you saw the back of their head walk past and they kept missing the main characters. But you can still do an episode that genuinely like does a very sweet follow-up on some of these characters. Like off the top of my head, one of the ones that I think about is some of the stuff in Deep Space Nine between Garak and Bashir that is always implied, and that like the actors were both like, we both played this as a queer relationship that was just not allowed to be put on screen. Um, Lower Decks has an episode where it gets to be like, no, 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 they were canonically a couple. Here they are, like they have a little kiss in the background of the scene. They're just like, we can go explore that stuff we weren't allowed to put on screen. We can come back and revisit those characters and give them what we kind of wanted to give them earlier. It's nice that Lower Decks, I think, did some genuinely really good stuff in that range. That, yeah, I can see how frustrating it is to have a big budget live action episode of Star Trek that feels like it is the promise of, let's go back and re explore that thing that is really important to you, feel like it fumbles the ball in a way where it's like, oh, we're not going to get another big budget live action attempt at revisiting this idea because this episode exists. Yeah, there is
Well,
wasted potential for sure.
yeah, But that's
Yeah,
what I was going to bring up actually, because the Garrick and Bashir stuff is the only stuff I really know about Lower Decks, and that's one of the reasons that I'd be happy to watch, because I like that stuff.
yeah,
It's one of the reasons, and I must have mentioned this in the first episode we did, where if they're going to reboot the original series, I think they should make it animated. I think
yeah.
this series would have been better animated.
Honestly,
Actually,
yeah. I think
this episode could have been better
if the
animated.
Lower Decks writing team had been allowed to do, hey, just take the Lower Decks energy and put it on here's a bunch of university students at Starfleet, I think that could have really worked.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
because it's worth saying that we as 35-year-old British people are probably not the target audience for this series.
yeah,
It is pretty much for 20-year-olds, but there is such a like just because it's for younger people doesn't mean you need to pull it down to a less engaging and intellectually stimulating level, as Lower Decks and Prodigy have already shown.
yeah,
It, yeah,
yeah.
I didn't like this one, Laura.
I couldn't tell. No, it's as I say, I entirely understand why we land slightly, because like I think we largely agree on the things that work and the things that don't. I land a little more positively than you do on this episode, and you're right. It might well just be because Deep Space Nine is a little less important of a Star Trek to me. It is a Star Trek I enjoy a lot. I think it has some really wonderful episodes. It is not the one that I think about. In as
Right,
much
because
as
Voyager
yeah,
is probably the one that's more of your I grew up with this,
yeah,
right?
there's there are Star Trek characters and plot lines that if it had this treatment would have annoyed me more.
Yeah.
Um, and I can see that difference, but again, doesn't
Like
change.
imagine
Yeah,
this episode, but it's Tuvix. So I know Lower
I
Decks did something good with Tuvix, but imagine if this was Tuvix and
I
this
know,
was
I
like
know, I know.
the kind of
Yeah,
organization. But I will say, I think we've both been very upfront about the fact that there are lots of things about this series and this episode that we
there
like.
are some
It's
genuinely
just
great
that,
moments in this, and I like a lot about the premise. I
yeah.
again, this is such a Sam centric episode. Sam is such a good character, and this is one.
I want a Sam
Yeah,
series, right? If
yeah,
we don't see any of these characters ever again, and I don't think that's guaranteed because we're seeing Discovery characters filter in.
yeah,
I think Reno's pretty good in this series. I think she's got a rubbish first 7 episodes and then she gets really good.
mm,
I think Tilly's not great, but I would love to see more Sam in a you've graduated from Starfleet, and we're going to put another thing in the 32nd century,
yeah.
and here's Sam, and maybe here's Genesis as well, because I quite like her. She's quite
Well,
fun.
being photonic, you can drop Sam. You know, as demonstrated with the Doctor, you can down the line get Sam's actor back to be like, yeah, we're bringing this character back pretty much at any point, and I would be very happy to see that actor brought back.
I'll be very
Um,
happy if we get another Sam episode in season 2.
oh, I'm sure
Right,
we will. I
give
fit.
me at least 2. We've had 2 here. Give me another 2,
Yeah,
and like make her a big thing in the next series. We've done Caleb. He's
yeah,
found his mum. Spoilers. Like that, he'll still be there, but
yeah.
let's get away from the
Sam's the main character for season 2. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
we should probably wrap this up because this is definitely the longest of these we've done so far.
I've worn myself out from ranting about
uh,
how this show somehow didn't use Bajor for this.
I've still got a Twitch stream and a podcast about Twin Peaks to record tonight. So thank you so much everyone for watching us unpack this episode of Starfleet Academy. Geoffrey, remind everyone, where do people find the things you do on the internet?
You can find me on jeffreybunting.co.uk.
You can find me
That's it.
You can find me at Laura K Buzz, places where people are on the internet. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll be back with another episode in a couple of weeks. Goodbye.
Bye.